So what kind of tasks you can expect as a software engineer at work? Hello guys, my name is Vitaly. I'm a lead software engineer in Los Angeles, California, and today we're gonna discuss with you the typical task of the software engineer at work. I'm gonna give you the examples of the tasks from my personal experience, so hopefully it would be useful and interesting for you, so make sure to watch this video till the end. And by the way guys, if you want to see more programming content from me like this and your recommendations, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below and ring the bell. So back in 2013, I joined the software outsourcing company as a full-stack software engineer, and I started working on a project that was related to healthcare area. And the purpose of the project was to simplify the flow how the customers are buying their health insurance. We had 3 team members, a team leader, 2 software engineers, me, and we also had a separate team of QA engineers that helped us to verify our logic according to business requirements, and also we have the person who was responsible for the business analytics. We also used Scrum. It's a kind of methodology where you divide all your scope into the smaller pieces and work on it as a team during the fixed limit of time. And in terms of Scrum, this kind of limited amount of time usually called sprint. And by the way, guys, if you want to hear more about Scrum and how it is used in the real-world application, let me know in the comments down below. There is a special meeting according to the Scrum procedure that is called the sprint planning. And according to the sprint planning, you would usually discuss the type of tasks that you're gonna do for the sprint. And after the sprint planning, you would usually know already what kind of work you're gonna do for the current sprint. And in case if you just joined the team, you can expect to have simpler and usually more boring tasks because team would usually give you some time to ramp up with the current functionality of the project. So my project was comprised of 3 parts. It's a front-end layer with JavaScript, it's a Java layer on the backend, and it's also a relational database with SQL as a storage. And I was pretty much writing the code on each of these 3 layers, so I'm gonna try to give you the real-world examples from my personal experience on each of them. And let's talk a little bit about the purpose of the task. Imagine the usual web application, and on a web application you would usually have the user information page. It's usually the page where you can provide or you can modify the existing information of the current user, and the current task needed to add and extend the current logic with the new field that would allow the user to input the phone number, and then eventually this phone number would be propagated from the front end to backend, and then backend would store it subsequently to the database. For this task, we would need to write the logic on each of the 3 layers. We need to write the logic on the front end, then propagate it to backend, add the logic there, and then store it inside the database. Let's discuss a little bit what we're gonna do on each layer. So in a relational database, we usually have our information organized in the tables, and I already assumed that you would have some kind of table like user info, where you would already store some information regarding the user, for example, first name, last name, and email. You have a requirement that you pretty much need to extend it with the new column. It's going to be phone number. And for that, you would need to modify the table so it would accept the new value and can store your phone number within the same user information table. You should also consider the uniqueness of the phone number because it's usually the constraint so that you would have only one phone number to be unique across all of the accounts for the current system. And that would mean that you need also, by extending the table, you would also need to add the uniqueness constraint to current database. Also, in case if you are working with the real-world application, it would usually mean that application would be quite big and subsequently it's gonna have a big database. And on big databases, we can have such additional functionality as the storage procedures or triggers. And when we add the new field to the appropriate table and add the unique constraint, we should also consider modifying the storage procedures or triggers because there is a high chance that storage procedure is going to use the fields from the user table or triggers too, so that we would need to extend those queries and functionality to work with our newly added field. Also, we should consider it was not a pet project. We had like 200 tables in our database, so even a simple modification of the single table can be such a headache. So the second layer where we should cover our functionality would be the Java backend. On Java, we usually have some code that can connect our application to the database and perform some basic CRUD operations like create, read, update, or delete. It usually means that we would have some kind of tools that would allow us to translate the Java object into the relational database representation. We usually call it as object relational mapping. So that in your code in Java you would have some kind of user class that would have the information that would be represented similar as on database, but in object relational representation. For example, you would have like a user class that would have first name field, last name field, email, and you would need to extend it with a new phone number field. Not only you need to extend the model with the phone field, but you should also cover the CRUD operation. So in case if you are using, for example, some SQL queries to perform the CRUD operation, you need to consider adding your new field into the queries so that it would fetch and save the new field into the database. Also, we need to add the server-side validation because usually we can have multiple clients connected to the backend. We can have a web application in browser, we can have the mobile phone, we can have even the IoT device, and we always need to validate the information from the front end so that we would store only correct information into the database, so that it would be consistent. So we should also consider adding the validation for this field because it's pretty common when front end sends some incorrect information and we need to be able to check the format of the provided phone on the server side. And it would usually require writing, for example, the regular expression that can check, for example, the length of the phone number or the correctness of the phone number. And the last layer where we need to add our field is on the front end to display it to the user. So on the front end application, we would usually have some HTML code that would display our field, and we need to update our user information page to have this kind of new field that can accept the phone number. We would also need to add the validation to that field, likewise we did on the backend, because we want to create the application with the good user experience. And for that, we need to provide the quick feedback to the customers that the input field, the input phone number was incorrect. For that, you would probably also use the regular expression, and you should also update the code that is sending the user information from that page to the backend, so that in your request, when you save the information from the user page, your newly added field will be propagated to the backend. After adding the field on each of the three layers, of course, you need to test it end-to-end, starting from the front end, and then observe how your field was correctly saved into the database. And don't get me wrong, the software engineer is not only about writing the code. You would have much more responsibilities. For example, you would need to verify the business requirements with the business analyst. You would need to check with the QA team how exactly they're going to verify your functionality, because you as a software engineer who wrote the particular piece of code would have more context about how this code works, and you need to guide the QA engineers how exactly they need to test your code, for example. Also, additionally, you would need to write the documentation, communicate with the team about the functionality and technical solution, as well as you need to pass the code review from your team. So this was the typical task of the software engineer back in those days when I just started my career, but I'm gonna give you more like practical examples on each layer so that I can give you a little bit more context what kind of tasks you can expect. So another examples of the task on database layer would be like select all the users that bought the health insurance last year but this period of time. Or another one, for example, select all the users that bought the health insurance using the Visa card but not MasterCard. On the back end, you could have a task like add the new request handler that can send the greetings email to newly registered customers. And on the front end, we could have a task like adding the filter to the health insurance comparison page so that we can filter health insurance by the company name, by price, benefits, and duration. And don't forget that there are going to be different projects that you would work with, and on each of the project you could have a really different standards and code practices, as well as the branching strategies, the way you should submit the code for the code review. And on each of these layers, you're going to have the different technical stack. So not only you need to follow all the processes and guidelines, but you should also write the clean code that would align with the current architecture on the project. So what do you think about this, guys? Was it what you've been expected from you with the work of the software engineer? So I tried to show you the responsibility that you would have as a software engineer, and I gave you the examples of the practical tasks I had back to those days when I just started my career. But remember that your experience can be pretty different from mine. In any case, it's expected from software engineer to have a good logical thinking, to have a decent understanding of one of the popular programming languages, And it's also good to have some basic knowledge about the technologies that you're gonna use on the project. But anyway, if you're just starting, everybody in the team understands it. So in case if you're doing something wrong, your team will let you know and they would cover your back in most of the cases. And by the way, guys, if you like this video, make sure to hit that thumb up icon down below, because it's gonna help the YouTube algorithms to understand that this video is good and it would promote it better. It's a simple action for you, but good result for me. And I will see you in the next video. Bye!